Wouldn't it be great if your first sweater could look this good? Stylish, well-fitted, and something you would actually want to wear and show off. Just imagine that proud moment when you can say, yes, I made it. Well, grab your yarn and needles, because that's exactly what we are going to do together. Learn how to knit the first sweater step by step. This sweater is not only quick and effortless to make, but also it's the base for those stunning Nordic pullovers full of color and texture. Yes, we will definitely need one of those someday, but for now, this sweater helps you build skills and confidence while being fun and enjoyable project on its own. Completing your first hand-knit sweater is a moment that truly puts you on cloud nine. In this video, I will show you how to knit a circular yoke sweater. This is one of the simplest sweater types, worked top down and in the round. We will begin with a 1x1 rib for the neck, then add a few rows to shape the neckline, and work 5 sections of the yoke with evenly spaced increases. After that, we will separate the body and sleeves and finish everything with a 1x1 rib edge and no seaming. If you have only used straight needles and feel nervous about knitting in the round, don't worry. You will see how to join your stitches easily, and from there is just knit stitches all the way. Could it be easier? Well, yes. You can skip the short rows on the back neck, but let's tackle them together instead. Most popular and well-fitted patterns include short rows, so learning them now will give you the confidence for future projects. And remember, you have always the option to step back. You can give the short rows a try, and if it's not the right time to learn these techniques, you can skip them. But I'm 99.999%, did I emphasize 9 enough? I'm sure we will master it together. If it feels like a project you would love, head over on Etsy or Ravelry to download the PDF pattern, because it includes the stitch counts for all 12 sizes, and I designed it to guide you through the entire process. I've also created a special project planner and row counter for circular yoke sweaters to help you stay on track and take notes along the way. You will find everything you need, links and extra details right there in the description box below this video. The first sweater is part of Essentials series created for beginners to explore the basics of knitwear. If you like this idea of knitting foundational pieces, let me know with a thumbs up. And don't worry, I will be sharing more challenging designs too. There is already a tutorial for a drop shoulder sweater construction, and I encourage you to knit that after this one, because it's the ideal warm-up for the artist sweater, a beautiful textured design we will be knitting into this winter. But today we have the first sweater. Grab a pattern, yarn, your enthusiasm, and let's dive right in. In this tutorial, I will be using Drops Nepal yarn in the lovely blue mint color 8922. This is the same yarn I chose for my very first Melamut sweater, and it quickly became a favorite. It's an alpaca blend with a gentle fluff that feels soft and cozy, yet smoother than regular 100% wool. What I appreciate most is how forgiving it is. You can unravel and reknit as many times as you need, and it still looks great, like it was designed to guide you through learning without any stress. It's these little things that make it such a good yarn for beginners. There are so many beautiful colors to choose from, and I probably knit with about half of them by now, and a few have really stood out. The light beige, which I used for my first Melamut sweater, is one. Another is a soft fog shade. My mom once said that the drop and trim sweater I knit in that color shimmered like silk. And I also can't forget the chalk color with its unique and delicate tone. Also, it's nice that Drops Nepal yarn is budget-friendly and widely available. You can easily find local resellers on the Garn Studio website. Just go to the Find a Store section and select your country from the drop-down menu. I encourage you to give it a try, because I'm sure it will become one of your favorite yarns too. If you are curious about exploring more creative yarn choices, I've shared some great alternatives in the Drop and Trim sweater tutorial. You will find the link in the description that takes you straight to the part where I discuss them. Alright, let's start with the very first step, the neck. Since this is a top-down sweater, this is where it all begins, and I'm so excited to guide you through it. First up, grab your 4.5mm circular needles with a 40cm cable length. That's US size 7 with a 16-inch cable. Now, let's cast on the stitches for your size. I'm knitting a size M for this tutorial, but you should follow the pattern instructions for your size. I like to use the long tail cast on, but if you have a favorite method, feel free to stick with that. Here is a little tip if you are using a long tail cast on. To make sure you have enough yarn, measure out a tail about 3 times the length of the neckline. It doesn't have to be perfect, just enough, so you won't run out halfway through casting on. This way you also avoid having a super long tail left over. Add 1 extra stitch to make a seamless join when we will start knitting in the round. We will take care of that in just a moment. Once you've cast on all your stitches, take a moment to double check that everything is neat and untwisted. Your stitches should be sitting in one direction. It's a small but very important step. We are ready to join in the round. This is where that extra stitch comes into play. In your right hand you've got the needle with the last cast on stitch and the yarn tail. In your left hand you are holding the needle with the very first stitch you cast on. To join, slide the first stitch from your left needle to the right. Then lift that extra stitch over the one you just moved and let it slip off the needle. Now slip the stitch back to your left needle and give the yarn tails a gentle pull to snug everything up. And there you go, we are all joined up and ready to start knitting in the round. Place the beginning of the round stitch marker here, so you always know where each new round starts. Let's create the neck using a classic 1x1 rib. It's as simple as knitting 1 stitch, then purling the next, and repeating that all the way around. And here's a small but helpful tip. When you're switching from a knit to a purl stitch, give that purl stitch a gentle tug. It helps keep your ribbing neat and even. If this is your first sweater, don't rush, take your time. Knitting is all about enjoying the process, and each round will feel smoother as you go. Keep working that knit 1, purl 1 pattern for the number of rounds the pattern calls for. This will give you a ribbed edge about 3-4 centimeters or 1.5 to 2 inches tall, depending on your size. And there you have it. That's how the neck is looking. Clean, classic, and ready for the next step. Great job on finishing the neck. Now it's time to move on to the yoke, and first we are going to set up a safety net, a little trick to help you feel more confident as we go. We will be working the short rows next, and I want you to know that you can always go back to this point if needed and try again. To do this, take a tapestry needle with a piece of thinner yarn in a contrasting color and thread the needle through the all live stitches on your needle. This is your lifeline. If anything goes wrong, you can simply unravel to this round and all your stitches will be safe on the thread. You just need to slip them back onto the knitting needle and follow the next step. It's much easier than trying to catch each stitch or starting over from the cast on. So take a few moments to set up your lifeline. Next, we need to switch to the larger needle size. Ribbed parts like neck or bottom hem are usually worked with smaller needles to keep them snug and neat. Take your 5.5mm needles, also with a 40cm cable, that's US size 9 with a 16-inch cable, and hold them in your right hand. For this setup round, we will knit all the stitches from the left needle onto these larger needles. Set up round 0. For sizes from 2XS to size large, you just knit all the stitches in this round. Try not to knit too tightly, it will make the following round easier to work. And now all the stitches are transferred onto the larger needles. If you are knitting sizes XL or larger, we need to add a few extra stitches using a simple increase. This is important because if we had cast on all the stitches right from the start, the neckline would have been too wide, like a boat neck, which isn't the look we want for the sweater. By adding the stitches now, we can keep the neckline neat while giving the yoke the right amount of width. I will demonstrate the process for size XL, and the same principle applies for larger sizes, so make sure to check your pattern instructions. For size XL, the instruction says knit 2, then repeat the knit 9, make 1 to the last 2 stitches, and finish with knit 2. Here is how it works. Start by knitting 2 stitches, then knit 9 stitches. And make an increase. I will show you how to do the make one left increase here. With your left needle, lift the strand between the last stitch you knit and the next one, from the front to back, and knit it into the back of the loop. We increased 1 stitch. Pretty simple, isn't it? Now repeat the sequence until there are just 2 stitches left. Knit 9 stitches, and make 1. Pick up the strand between the last stitch you knit and the next one, inserting the left needle from the front to back, and then knit it through the back loop. And knit those last 2 stitches. Once finished, size XL should have 8 more stitches when it started with. You've got the principle, so now you can repeat the steps for your size. Okay, all sizes have placed the lifelines, switched to the larger needles, and finished the setup round. We can move on to shaping the back neck. German short rows might sound a bit tricky at first, but once you see them in action, they are actually quite simple. They give the sweater a comfortable fit along the front neckline. Remember, you have that lifeline as your safety net, so feel free to try it out without worrying. The beginning of the round marker is right in the middle of the back section, so keep that in mind as we work through these steps. Okay, short row 1 on the right side. Knit 5 stitches. Then place your first marker. I will use a yellow one. Now turn your work to the wrong side. Short row number 2 on the wrong side. We need to make a double stitch to avoid gaps on the knitted fabric. Bring the yarn to the front of your work, just like you would if you were about to purl. Slip the first stitch on the left needle purlwise onto the right needle. Pull the yarn firmly over the top of the needle to the back. As you do this, the stitch you just slip will look like it's stretching, and you will see 2 loops or legs hanging over the needle. This is your double stitch. Pull the yarn tight enough so the loops are clearly visible. Bring the yarn again to the front and continue purling all the way to the beginning of the round marker. Slip the marker and purl 5 more stitches. And place your second marker. I'm using a green one. Now turn your work back to the right side. Short row number 3. Make a double stitch on the right side. Bring the yarn to the front of your work, then slip the first stitch on the left needle knitwise onto the right needle. Pull the yarn tightly over the top of the needle to the back of your work. As you pull, the stitch you just slipped will stretch, creating 2 visible legs over the needle. This is your double stitch on the right side. Now pull the yarn tightly and knit to the double stitch you made in the previous row, just before the marker number 1. You will recognize it by its crisscrossed look. When you reach it, knit the double stitch as if it were a single stitch, meaning you will knit through both loops together, like this. Remove the marker and knit 5 more stitches. And place the marker back. Turn your work to the wrong side. Short row number 4 on the wrong side. Make another double stitch by bringing yarn to the front of your work, slipping the first stitch on the left needle purlwise onto the right needle, and pulling the yarn firmly over the top of the needle to the back. Ta-da! A double stitch. Okay, now purl to the next double stitch right before the marker number 2. And purl it as a single stitch through both loops. Remove the marker and purl 5 more stitches. And place the marker back. Turn your work to the right side. Now, repeat rows 3 and 4 the number of times required in the pattern. Let's go through a couple more rows together just to boost your confidence. For row 5 on the right side, let's start by making another double stitch. Bring the yarn to the front, slip the first stitch knitwise onto the right needle and pull the yarn over the top to the back. And knit across to the next double stitch from the previous row right before marker number 1. When you reach it, knit through both loops together as they were a single stitch. After that, remove marker number 1, knit 5 more stitches. And put the marker back. Now we will turn the work to the wrong side. For row 6 on the wrong side, we will start by making a double stitch again. Bring the yarn to the front, slip the first stitch purlwise onto the right needle and pull the yarn firmly over the top. Now purl across to the next double stitch from the previous row, which should be right before the marker number 2. When you get there, purl the stitch through both loops as if it's one stitch. Remove the marker and purl 5 more stitches. And place the marker back. And now turn your work to the right side. Okay, complete the necessary number of short rows for your size and I will meet you at the final step. Great, we are almost finished with the short rows. Since you are ended on the wrong side, turn your work to the right side and make the last double stitch. And knit to the beginning of the round marker. To finish, we will knit one full round. As you go, work each double stitch as a single stitch and knit it through both loops. Remove marker number 1 when you reach it and continue until marker number 2. Remove the second marker. Knit the last double stitch as a single stitch. And keep knitting until you are back at the beginning of the round marker. The German short rows are complete. You've just shaped a beautifully smooth neckline. But if you encounter any problems or if you want to start over and try again, just slip the stitches of the needle and unravel to the lifeline. Place the stitches back onto the needle, work the setup round again and proceed to the short row number 1. And if short rows aren't quite what you want to tackle right now, that's perfectly okay. You've already made a huge step by trying them. Next time, I'm sure you will master it. Simply unravel to the lifeline, work the setup round again and skip ahead to the second part of the yoke, which we will start right now. Alright, here we are in the second part of the yoke, where we will start adding increases to give the first task sweater its shape and width across the chest. This yoke is all about effortless knitting in the round, with just 5 simple increase rounds to shape it up. I will guide you through each increase round and we will cover some helpful tips along the way to keep things running smoothly. Okay, before we jump into the first increase round, let's set up a little safety net with a lifeline. Think of it as a friendly backup. Just in case anything doesn't go as planned, you can easily return to the spot. So, in the first increase round, we will follow a straightforward sequence. Knit 2 stitches, then make 1 stitch. Start by knitting 2 stitches. Then, use your left needle to pick up the strand between stitches from front to back and knit it into the back of the loop. Just like that, we've made a new stitch. And keep repeating, knit 2, make 1 to the end of the round. Let's try that once more together. Knit 2 stitches. Then make 1 by lifting the strand between the stitches with your left hand needle from the front to back and knitting through the back loop. Keep a comfortable pace, there is no need to rush. When you reach the end of the round, make your final increase just before the beginning of the round marker. And the first increase round is done. Great job! Next, let's quickly check our stitch count. If it's a bit off, don't worry, that's what our lifeline is for. Simply unravel stitch by stitch and place each one back on the left needle. If any stitches slip, just unravel to the lifeline and all your stitches will be secure. Take your time, working slowly and carefully here will help get it right. And now for the relaxing part. Just knit the number of rounds listed for your size and enjoy watching the yoke take shape with each round. I will be right here when it's time for the next increase round. In the meantime, here is a couple of handy tips. Add a new skein of yarn at the center back. This keeps those woven in ends neatly out of sight. Switch to longer circular needles as needed. With each increase round, your stitch count will grow. Starting with a 40 centimeters 16-inch cable is perfect, but as your yoke expands, switching to an 80 or 100 centimeters, this is 31 or 40-inch cable, will give you more room. After we knitted required number of rounds for our sizes, let's move on to increase round number 2, where we will follow a new sequence. Knit 3 stitches, make 1 stitch. Before we begin, let's set up another lifeline. Alright, start by knitting 3 stitches. Then make 1 stitch by lifting the strand between stitches from front to back, knitting into the back loop, just like before. And continue with knit 3, make 1 all the way around. When you reach the end of the round, make the final increase just before the beginning of the round marker. Perfect, increase round number 2 is done. Now, knit the next few rounds without any increases. I will be here when it's time for increase round 3. You can place a removable stitch marker, it will make keeping track of your rounds so much easier. Well done! With those plain rounds behind us, we are ready for increase round number 3. This time we will be following knit 4 stitches, make 1 stitch as our sequence. And yes, you guessed it, let's add another lifeline. For an extra smooth setup, you can place it on the round just before the increase round. This way it won't get in the way when you are making those new stitches. So start by knitting 4 stitches. Then make 1 by lifting the strand between the stitches and knitting into the back loop. Repeat this pattern, knit 4, make 1 to the end of the round. And just as before, make the last increase just before the beginning of the round marker. Increase round 3 complete. Now we will knit a few rounds without increases, and I will see you here for increase round number 4. Alright, we are at increase round 4, our last regular increase before the final 5th round. This time our sequence is knit 5 stitches, make 1 stitch. And yes, another lifeline goes in before we begin. Let's get started. Knit 5 stitches. And then make 1 stitch by lifting the strand between the stitches and knitting it through the back loop, as usually. And keep repeating knit 5, make 1 to the end of this round. The last increase, as always, is right before the beginning of a round marker. Nicely done! Increase round 4 is complete. Now knit a required number of rounds for your size without any increases. We are finally at increase round 5, and this one has a bit of a twist. If you are knitting size medium like I am, the sequence is straightforward. Knit 6, make 1 all the way around. But for most other sizes, the increases are spread across the round in a different order to give that perfect fit. I will demonstrate with size small so you can see the approach, and feel free to jot down the sequence for your size. It really helps keep track. For size small, the sequence is knit 7, make 1, repeated 8 times, followed by knit 8, make 1, repeated 20 times. Let's walk through size small's sequence. Start with knit 7. Make 1. And repeat this 7 more times for a total of 8 repeats. Then, next sequence with knit 8 stitches. Make 1. And repeat this 19 more times to finish the round. For all other sizes, follow the sequence in the pattern. When you reach the end, take a moment to check your stitch count. It should match the total for your size in the pattern. And with that, increase round 5 is done. Now, knit the specified number of rounds for your size and enjoy the smooth section. I will see you soon when it's time for our first try-on. Alright, we are at the control point number 1. Let's take a moment to check a few things to make sure everything is on track before we continue. First, let's measure the yoke. Start from the top of the neckline down, just below the ribbing at the front. The length should be close to the range for your size. Next, count your stitches to see if they match the target number in the pattern. If everything lines up, congratulations, you are making wonderful progress. In just a moment, we will do a quick try-on. But if something doesn't match up, don't worry, let's troubleshoot together. Here are a few things you can try. If your stitch count is just a few stitches off, you might have missed an increase or two. No problem, just double check your fabric to ensure there are no drop stitches creating holes. For a difference of 1-2 stitches, you can unravel the last 6 stitches and reknit them, adding the missing stitches as you go. For anything more than a few stitches, it's best to go back to the 5th increase round and evenly add the necessary stitches with a make 1 increase. If the yoke seems a bit short, even with the right number of rounds, it could be your row gauge is a bit tighter than mine. Just add a couple of extra rounds until you reach the length listed in the pattern. Now, if you are more than a few centimeters or 1-2 inches off, that might mean your yarn is thinner than planned. In this case, it's worth double checking your gauge to be sure. If it's coming out too long, try unraveling a round or two. If it's more than a few centimeters or 1-2 inches longer, it could mean your row gauge is a bit looser, which can make the sweater slightly bigger. To double check, measure your row gauge over 10 centimeters 4 inches. If it's 2 or more rows over the required gauge, you might need to switch to a smaller needle size or choose another yarn. Also check your stitch gauge too. If you need more help, just leave a comment with all details you have. Your yarn and needle size, which size are you knitting, stitch count, yoke length, and the gauge you measured on your piece. I am happy to help, and so are other knitters. And now for a quick try-on. Slip your stitches onto scrap yarn, a silicone cord, or a thinner pair of needles. This try-on won't show the final fit, we will see it after we separate the sleeves and join the body, but it's a wonderful way to admire your progress so far. You might notice the neckline looks a bit tight, but don't worry, it will settle in after we add the sleeves and wash the sweater. Enjoy this moment, appreciate all the work you've done so far, and once you are ready, we will keep going. I hope that first try-on brought a little excitement and has you eager to keep going. Let's get all those stitches back on the needles, because it's time to separate the sleeves and work on the body in the round. You will find yourself at the beginning of the round, right in the middle of the back section. Start by knitting the stitches for the first half of the back. Next, slip the right sleeve stitches onto a scrap yarn or a silicone cord. Just slide them off the needle and onto the yarn, which will hold them safely while we focus on the body. Now we will cast on a few stitches under the arm for ease and shaping. The simplest way to do this is with the backward loop method. Wrap the working yarn around your thumb, then slip the loop onto the right needle. That's one stitch. Keep going until you've cast on the required number for your size. With the right sleeve stitches set aside, knit across the front section of the sweater. Next, slip the left sleeve stitches onto another piece of scrap yarn, just like we did for the right sleeve. Cast on the same number of stitches under this arm using the backward loop method. Finally, knit the remaining back stitches to bring us back to the beginning of the round. Done! The sleeve stitches are now safely on the scrap yarn, and the stitches for the front, back and underarms are on the needles, ready to go. And we are all set to continue with effortless in the round knitting for the body. The biggest and most complicated part is behind us. Now, the exciting moment is just around the corner. You will soon get to try your sweater, and this time you will actually see how it fits. It's such a rewarding milestone, and I think you will be amazed on how much you've already done. Here's what we will do. Start by removing the beginning of the round marker and knit up to the first set of underarm stitches. Then knit about half of those stitches. And once you've done that, place the beginning of the round marker right here under the arm. This will be our new beginning of the round. If you are starting a new skein, joining it here or at the other underarm helps keep the yarn tails discreet and out of the center of your fabric. Then knit around for about 10 rounds. This will secure those underarm stitches, and then we can do our next try-on. This section is all about enjoying the flow of each stitch, so take it at your own pace. I will meet you at the control point 2 when you are ready for the next step. These underarm stitches might feel a bit tight in the first row, so gently slide them closer to the needle tip. It will make knitting them much easier. Just be careful not to let any stitches slip off. We've reached control point number 2. This is a great moment to pause and check that your sweater is shaping up the way you want. Let's slip about half of the stitches onto some scrap yarn, or like I'm using, a silicone cord. A couple of things to keep in mind as you check the fit. The neckline will naturally loosen a bit over time with washing and wear, so don't worry too much if it feels snug there. We are mostly looking at the chest area and armholes. Ideally, this part shouldn't feel too baggy or oversized. Here's a quick checklist. Measure across the chest to make sure you are within range in the size chart at the second page in the pattern, and double check the yoke length. If it's turning out bigger than expected, it could be a gauge issue. Take a moment to recheck your gauge. If it matches, you need to decide if you want to keep going with this size or try a smaller one for a better fit. If it's feeling a bit snug, this could mean your yarn is a bit thinner than the pattern recommends. Take a look at your gauge to confirm, and if you are comfortable with a slightly closer fit, you are good to keep going. A little less positive ease can look very flattering. One last tip. When I'm unsure about the fit of a new design, I like to hold the body stitches and start on a sleeve. It's a quick way to get a better sense of the overall fit without knitting the entire body and prevent unraveling. Once you are happy with the fit, continue knitting the body in the round until you reach your desired length before starting the body ribbing. If you are having a good time with this tutorial so far, I would be thrilled if you gave it a thumbs up. And if you have any ideas or tips on how I could make these tutorials even better, please share your thoughts in the comments, and I would really love to hear from you. Well, friends, we've reached the final step of the body, the bottom edge. Just look at how far you've come. It's also a great time to try on your sweater again and see if you're happy with the length. If you feel like adding a little more, now is your chance. Keep in mind, the ribbing will add about 7 cm or 3 inches to the overall length. Now, let's finish the body with a ribbed hem. We need to switch to the 4.5 mm US 7 needles. If your stitches are on the scrap yarn, you can slip them directly onto the smaller needles. If you have your stitches on the 5.5 mm US 9 needles, simply pick up your 4.5 mm US 7 needles and start knitting with them. It's just like we did when moving from the neck to the yoke. And before jumping into the ribbing, we will knit one extra round to create a smoother transition between the stockinette fabric and 1x1 ribbing. Simply knit all the stitches in this round. Once that's done and all your stitches are transferred to the smaller needles, we start working a 1x1 rib. Knit one stitch, purl one stitch, and repeat to the end of the round, just like we did for the neck. We will continue this pattern for the 15 rounds. When the ribbing is complete, it's time to cast off. Be sure to keep the edge loose so it stays stretchy and comfortable. My go-to is the basic cast-off method. It's simple, and if you ever want to adjust the length afterward blocking, it's easy to undo and rework. To keep the edge looking neat and stretchy, I like to give each stitch a gentle stretch. And that's it, the body is done. Take a moment to admire how much you have accomplished. Next up, we will move on to the sleeves. You are so close now, and before you know it, your beautiful sweater will be ready to wear. Okay, we've reached the sleeves and we will work them in the round, and you get to choose the method you are most comfortable with. You can start the same way we did with the neckline, using circular needles with a 40 centimeters 16-inch cable. Another option is a set of double-pointed needles. And finally, my favorite method, the magic loop technique with 80 centimeters 31-inch long cable. I filmed a separate video with all the tips and tricks for magic loop, so feel free to watch that and come back when you are ready to continue. To begin, transfer your sleeve stitches from the scrap yarn onto your 5.5 millimeters US 9 needles. Next, let's pick up stitches around the armhole. Leave a yarn tail about 25 centimeters, 10 inches long. This will be super handy later to close up any small gaps. For some sizes, you will need to pick up a couple of stitches before the underarm cast-on section. For my size M, I will pick up 2 stitches here. If picking up stitches feels tricky, use a crochet hook to pull the yarn through and then slide the stitch onto the needle. Then pick up the stitches you cast on for the underarm. Finally, if your size calls for it, pick up a couple of additional stitches after the cast-on section. If you notice any gaps, you can pick up extra stitches to close them. But remember to decrease these extras in the next round using knit 2 together, so your stitch count matches the pattern. Once all your stitches are ready, knit across them. When you reach the yarn tail at the first pick it up stitch, use a crochet hook to temporarily secure it and hold the stitch in place. And place the beginning of the round marker in the middle of the underarm. This will now be your new starting point, and if you are adding a new skein, join the yarn here. This makes weaving in the ends later much less noticeable. We will now knit the sleeve to the required or desired length, and at the same time we will gradually decrease stitches to shape the sleeve and tape it towards the cuff. Let's knit to the first decreasing round, and I will show you exactly how to do it. Here we are at the first decreasing round. It's time to decrease 2 stitches in this round. Okay, start by knitting the first stitch of the round. Then knit the next 2 stitches together as if they were one. This decreases 1 stitch, and you will notice that the stitches you knitted together slant to the right, toward the beginning of the round marker. Next, knit across to the last 3 stitches of the round. For the second decrease, we want the stitches we are decreasing to slant to the left, to the marker. To do this, we will use the SSK, slip slip knit, technique. Slip the next 2 stitches knitwise, then insert your left needle from the front and knit them together through the back loop. See how the stitches you just worked now slant to the left. Finally, knit the last stitch of the round, and your first decreasing round is complete. From here, continue knitting the required number of rounds for your size, work in decreases whenever the pattern indicates. To make things easier, I place a removable stitch marker to track where my decreases happen. Take your time, enjoy the process, and I will meet you at the cuff. We are at the cuffs. Can you believe how far we've come? You can take a moment to try on your sweater and see how the sleeve length feels. If everything looks good, but you would like a little extra length, feel free to add a few more rounds without decreases. Just remember the cuff will add about 7 cm, 3 inches, so keep that in mind. If the sleeve feels a bit too long, don't worry, it's an easy fix. You can unravel a few centimeters or inches to get it just right. If you're unsure how to do this, I will leave a link to a tutorial in the description below this video to guide you through it. Once the length feels perfect, get ready to switch to 4.5 mm US 7 needles to start the cuff. And before diving into the ribbing, we will need 1 extra round to create a smoother transition. Done. Now for the cuff, we will work a 1 by 1 rib, knitting 1 stitch, then purling 1 stitch, and repeating for 15 rounds. Some sizes have an uneven stitch count. You need to knit the first 2 stitches together, then purl the next one, and proceed with knit 1, purl 1. Once you've completed the ribbing, it's time to cast off your stitches. Keep it loose so the cuff stays stretchy and comfortable. The first sleeve is done, and you are just steps away from completing your first star sweater. I know it's tempting to hurry through these last moments, but take your time and enjoy the process. And let each stitch remind you the amazing work you've already done. Your first star sweater is complete. Can you believe it? Take a moment to hold it up, feel the fabric, and think about all the steps you have taken to get here. From bravely starting with the neckline, tackling those German short rows, working through all the increases in the yoke, and knitting every stitch of the body and sleeves. What a journey! And look at you now, not just with a finished sweater, but with a deeper confidence in your skills. I know this moment feels big, but let's pause here and give your sweater the attention it deserves. We will add the finishing touches to make it shine. These last steps, like weaving the ends and wet blocking, will transform it from finished to fabulous. Alright, turn your sweater inside out and grab the tapestry needle, scissors, and if you have one, a small crochet hook. It's always handy for those shorter yarn tails or tricky spots. Now we can remove the lifelines. If it feels tight or difficult to pull out, cut it in a few places to create shorter sections. I will show you how to hide the ends in the most invisible way possible. Let's start with the ribbing. Thread your yarn tail into the tapestry needle and weave it through one side of a knit stitch on the wrong side of the ribbing. Go through a few stitches in one direction, then reverse and go back a few stitches the other way. Like this. Now for the stockinette section, I will show you my favorite method I learned from the Stacey Perry on her Very Pink Knits channel. I will link her original video in the description and I also guide you through it right here. On the wrong side of the fabric you will see those loops, the umbrellas and smiles. Here is the technique. Start by inserting your needle into an umbrella loop, then move it into the next smile in the row above. Imagine it as going to 11 o'clock. Tighten the yarn gently. Skip over the next umbrella and insert the needle into the following smile. Go down to row below to a 5 o'clock umbrella and thread through. Skip over the next smile and insert the needle into the following umbrella. Finally, go back up into a smile in the row above at 1 o'clock. And that completes one round. Once you get the rhythm, you will feel more confident with this technique. Don't worry if it feels tricky at first. Rewatch this part as many times as you need to. It gets easier with practice. Now for the second yarn tail. I prefer to turn the sweater and repeat the process in the same direction as with the first tail. This way you don't need to switch the order of umbrellas and smiles. Let's go over the technique again, but this time with a contrasting yarn so you can see it more clearly. Start by finding the next umbrella loop, slip your needle under it, then move to the smile in the row above. Picture it as reaching up to 11 o'clock. Gently pull the yarn through. Next, skip one umbrella and go to the following smile. Slide your needle under it and then move down to the row below. Look for a 5 o'clock umbrella and thread your needle through that. Now skip one smile and find the next umbrella. Pull the yarn through and finish by going back up to a smile in the row above around 1 o'clock. And that's it. You can see how smooth and secure this technique looks even with contrasting yarn. Finally, let's handle the armholes. Use the yarn tail you left when picking up stitches for the sleeve and carefully thread it through any gaps. There is no strict method here, just improvise and aim to hide the teeny holes as neatly as possible. Once the gaps are closed, weave the yarn into the nearest seam to secure it. For shorter tails, a crochet hook can be a lifesaver. Even though we are knitters, I highly recommend keeping a small 3mm crochet hook nearby for picking up drop stitches or managing those shorter tails. Take your time here, we have worked so hard to get to this point, so let's make sure everything is finished beautifully. Once all the tails are woven in, carefully cut them close to the fabric. Great, now we are ready to move on to washing your sweater. We are in my bathroom, where I will show you how to wash your sweater. First, fill a basin or sink with a lukewarm water. Next, add a little bit of gentle detergent, something made for wool or delicate fabrics. I'm using No Rinse Eucalan, but you can use any wool-friendly option you like. Submerge the sweater into the water so the garment is fully soaked. Press it down gently with your hands to help it absorb the water. Once it's submerged, we will let it soak for about 20 minutes. If you are using regular detergent, rinse the sweater in fresh water after soaking. Squeeze out as much water as you can without agitating the fibers. Lay it flat on a clean towel, roll it up and press gently to absorb the remaining water. Once most of the water is out, transfer your sweater to a fresh, dry towel. Lay it flat and carefully shape it to the finished dimensions given in the pattern. This is where you can adjust any edges, smooth out any bumps, and ensure it dries in the perfect shape. Finally, leave it dry completely. This might take a day or two depending on the temperature and humidity in your home. And that's it. Thank you so much for knitting along with me. When your first sweater is done, please send me a photo. I will be so excited to see it. And if you feel inspired to keep going, let's stay in touch. Join me in Esenique, my weekly email for beginner knitters. It's full of tips, pattern ideas, yarn reviews, and a lot of goodies like that. You will find the link in the description. And see you next Tuesday. Bye bye.